All right, the next section, we're going to talk about quadratic equations and then by extension, quadratic inequalities. Once you can solve an equation, you can do an inequality. Okay, the steps to doing an inequality are going to be very similar to what we talked about when it came to doing absolute value inequalities, if you remember from the last section. So here we go. Section 3.3. I'm not going to waste your time and write this whole thing down. I've already typed it out for you, but it says an equation that can be written as ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, where a, b, and c are real numbers and a is not 0 for the same reason as we saw when we defined a quadratic function. This is just a quadratic equation in standard form. And again, I'm assuming you're familiar. If you are absolutely not familiar with this, email me or come down after class. Let's talk, because I got to get you caught up. To make sure that things don't go too bad. So there's three ways that we're going to solve these. So the first way, this is example 1. It's x squared minus 8x minus 20 equal to 0. Now the last way we talk about solving works for every quadratic equation. But in problems like this, where it's possible to factor the trinomial, factoring is a little faster. That's why I bothered to show it to you at all. So the process of factoring, remember, is unfoiling. And so on this one, since I don't have a number in front of the x squared, what I can do is I can just say, okay, there's the two binomials, so we're unfoiling. What are the two factors of x squared? Excuse me, what are the two factors that give me x squared? They have to be what? Okay, x and x. And if you remember your foiling, my first, my outers, my inners, my lasts. These second two numbers are going to be responsible for, when I multiply them, I get my lasts. When I add them, I get my middle. So what two factors of negative 20 add up to negative 8? Okay, negative 10, positive 2. Don't be afraid, okay, if you're trying to do this, maybe you didn't see negative 10 and positive 2 right away. Maybe you were on 5 and 4. Go ahead, write these things down. Don't be shy. Negative 5 and positive 4, that when you multiply gives you negative 20, but you don't get negative 8 when you add them. So you know that's not the right pair. Let's try something else. Okay? It's okay to be wrong. It gets you a step closer to the right answer. Once I have this factored, the book gives us this nice thing called the principle of zero products. I call it common sense. Common sense says if I have two numbers, if we're playing a game, it's Friday night, we're playing a fun math game, and I tell you, here's the clue. I multiply two numbers together, I get 0. What does one of the numbers have to be? 0. Okay? The book calls that the principle of zero products. It's just arithmetic from when you're in elementary school. And how that applies here is I'm going to take each of these factors. I've got this first factor that I don't know times this second factor that I don't know, but I do know that they equal 0. So that means either the first factor equals 0 or the second factor equals 0. One of those two things has to be true, or both. Well, if x minus 10 is 0, what's the value of x? Positive 10, just add 10 to both sides. We talked about that, I think, on our second day together when we talked about solving equations. If x plus 2 equals 0, what is x? Again, just subtract 2 from both sides. There's my two answers. The answers are negative 2 and 10. Boom. By the way, what we found, we're going to talk about this probably when we come back next time, but I just want to link this together with what we've been doing. When we set this equal to 0, what we've said is, when does this function have a y value of 0? Meaning, where does this function cross the x-axis? The x-axis is where the y values are 0. So what we found are, we can call it either the roots, we can call it the x-intercepts, or they're called the zeros. You'll see each of those terms at some point in your homework. So we have just found the two values where this graph, if I was to graph this, where it crosses the x-axis, at negative 2 and at 10. Please do the problem right next to it, exercise 1. I'm just going to interrupt you because I want to make sure we're doing the same thing. What do you have to do with that problem before you can begin solving it? You've got to make it equal to 0. You've got to subtract the 24. It has to be in the standard form. So if you started factoring the way it is, erase. Okay, you got to bring the 24 over. I'm just going to get started. There's no number in front of the x squared, so I can do this. The two factors that give me x squared are x and x. Maybe you're still figuring this part out. The two factors of negative 24, they add up to positive 5. They are going to be plus 8 minus 3. Remember, 12 and 2, those are good factors of 24, but they're not going to add up to 5. 6 and 4 are good factors of 24, not going to add up to 5. So if you wrote those down, that's okay. Your brain's working. So now I take the x plus 8 equal to 0, the x minus 3 equal to 0. If x plus 8 equals 0, that means x is negative 8. If x minus 3 equals 0, that means x is 3. And then here's my solution set, negative 8 and 3. Next problem. You notice, oh, that's very exciting, Mr. Perkins. You put a factoring problem that has a number in front of the x squared. Yes, I did. Again, hopefully this is review. If this is not review, then talk to me. Let's get you the help, get you caught back up where you need to be. It's probably just been a little bit of time, and you've been sitting home too long because of COVID. Now, there are different ways to factor something like this. I'm not telling you that what I'm going to show you here is the end all. Okay? My preference is if somebody taught you how to guess and check, but that takes a little longer to get to do and do it confidently. But if you can do that. But what I'm going to show you is what I show my intermediate algebra classes. Okay? What that book does, it's called the AC method. Again, if you have a different way to factor something when there's a number in front of the x squared, that's fine. You are not bound to my way of doing it. But if you don't have a way, hopefully this jogs your memory. And what the AC method says is this: I've got to take into account now this 2. I can't just put the factors of the lasts here because that 2 is going to affect things. So here's what I need to do. I need to say 2 times negative 21. That's the A times the C. 2 times negative 21 is negative 42. A times C. Now that's the number I need to figure out. What factors of negative 42 are going to add up to negative 11? What factors of negative 42 are going to add up to negative 11? So what are factors of 42? Well, 21 times 2 is a factor of 42, but that's not going to be the right thing. So let's try 7 times 6 gives me 42. That doesn't add up to negative. That doesn't add up to negative 11. And then let's see, 3 times 14. There it is. 3 times 14 is going to add up to negative 11. I'm going to make the 3 positive, and I'm going to make the 14 negative. 3 times negative 14 is negative 42. 3 plus negative 14 is negative 11. I got what I need. Same sort of process. Now, again, there's different ways you can do this. Students have shown me different methods. If you have a teacher that has shown you in high school something different, please use it. I'm just showing you this method will work all the time. So what I'm going to do with these two numbers now is I'm going to say, instead of a negative 11x here, I'm going to make it 3x minus 14x. What I've done is I've expanded this into 2 terms. The reason you would want to do this is now I can factor by grouping, and I'm just about done factoring. I know I've sped through this. I'm hoping that it's familiar stuff. If it is not familiar at all, it's on you. Send me an email. I've got a bunch of videos on this stuff. Okay, in fact, I think they're already linked on your Canvas shell. I just got to publish them. So if they are, I will publish them. They'll be down at the bottom of the Canvas shell when you get home. Okay, so I'm going to factor by grouping. I'm going to take an x out of these two, the first two terms to get 2x plus 3. I'm going to take a negative 7 out of the second pair of terms to get 2x plus 3. Factoring by grouping works if you have the same thing in the parentheses, which I do, which is good because I'm glad I didn't have a typo on this problem. So I'm going to factor out the 2x plus 3. What's left from the first term is x. What's left from the second term is minus 7. And there it is. It's factored. And now at this point, I do the same thing that I just did with the previous problems. I set each factor equal to 0. So I've got 2x plus 3 equals 0. X minus 7 equals 0. If 2x plus 3 equals 0, that means x is negative 3 halves. X minus 7, x is 7. There's my solution set. Example 2, or exercise 2, right next to it. It will factor however you want to factor it. Okay, if you're good at unfoiling, meaning just guessing and checking, do it. If you know the California method or the box method, or somebody showed me some weird method that they learned from somewhere else, that's great. I absolutely do not care as long as you factor it properly. Give you about another minute to make as much progress as you can. Again, please talk to me. If it's been a while since you've factored and solved quadratic equations, I totally get it. Okay, I'm not judging you. I just want to help you and make sure that this next test, which I'm hoping will be a nice walk in the park, actually is what I want it to be. Okay, so make sure you reach out to me if you need to. Also in Canvas, you can go over on the left column of your Canvas shell, and there's a link for TLCC tutoring, and you can make online tutoring appointments. They'll tutor you through Zoom. Okay, so you can do that and actually talk with somebody and work through problems with them if that's helpful. So what I did here again, I'm using the AC method because that's what I teach, and I'm just trying to stay consistent. So I multiplied the A times the C, the 3 times the negative 12, that gave me negative 36. So now what I need to do, and I've tried to write some quick little notes here for you. What I need is I need the 2 factors of negative 36 that add up to negative 16, that middle term. And you can see I had to fiddle around with it. I've never done this problem. Okay? I'm typing up all new notes this semester. So 3 and negative 12, that adds up to negative 9. That's it. That's not it. 4 and negative 9, that adds up to negative 5. That's not it. 2 and negative 18, that's negative 16. So those are the factors I'm going to use. And so I use those two factors to split my middle term up into two terms. And so now I factor by grouping. I'm going to take an x out of the first two terms. I'm going to take a negative 6 out of the next pair of terms. I notice my grouping worked because I've got the exact same thing in parentheses. So 3x plus 2. From the first term, I have this x left over. From the second term, I have negative 6 left over. There's my factored equation. So however you got from here to here, okay, if you factored a different way, we should all have the same pair of factors. And now I take each factor and I set it equal to 0. 3x plus 2, when I subtract the 2 and divide by 3, I get negative 2/3. When I add the 6, I get positive 6. So there are my two solutions to that equation. So the first thing is solving a quadratic equation by factoring. We've got just enough time for the second thing. The second thing works if your equation is given to you in a very particular format, which not a lot of them will be, but you'll have some homework problems will be. If you have something squared equal to a number. So the format here is I've got a perfect square equal to a number. In that instance, there is a shortcut to go ahead and solve this. What I'm going to do is I am going to take the square root of both sides. I am going to undo this square right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the square root of the left side and the square root of the right side to undo the perfect square. So you can only use this in this very specific situation that you have a perfect square equal to a number. If there's an x over here, it doesn't work. Okay, it has to be a number over here. But when it does work, when I take the square root of x plus 2 squared, what does that become? And here's the one thing to remember. When you impose a square root on a problem, you actually get two answers. Because if you go back up the ladder, there are two numbers you can square in order to get 13. You can do positive and negative square root of 13. When you put a square root into a problem, you create two answers, a positive answer and a negative answer. Okay, that's really just the big trick to the problem. Last thing to do is I'm going to subtract the 2. And I get two answers. X is equal to negative 2 plus or minus square root of 13. I don't know if my math lab wants you to separate the two answers. Just follow their instructions. I'm happy if you write two answers like this. And you might be saying, Mr. Perkins, where are the two answers? The first one is negative 2 plus the square root of 13. There's the first answer. The second answer is negative 2 minus the square root of 13. There's the second one. So here's my solution set. So here's how we're going to finish up. We've got 2 minutes. I just want you to do, we'll start at exercise 4 when we come back. So I want you to do exercise 3. I'll give you a minute and a half to do that, and then I will finish it up, and hopefully we'll all see we got the right answer. If you want to do the other exercise is identical to the one that I just did. All right, so you can see that I've already got this. I gave it to you in the format that you need. It's a perfect square equal to a number. So I can go ahead real quick and I can impose a square root on this. So I'm going to take the square root of the left side and the square root of the right side. What's the square root of x squared? Since I have put the square root in the problem, I'm going to get a positive and a negative answer. And then this is review of a couple days ago. What's the square root of negative 36? Remember, we can get complex number answers. So my two answers are positive 6i and negative 6i. I'm going to put that in a solution set, and I'm good. All right, I am done with you. I hope you had an amazing